Are you sure your children and grandchildren are walking the right path with God? Do today's youth truly understand the importance of faith and their connection with Him? Because the heartbreaking truth is that millions of teenagers are drifting away from God for 3 reasons that were revealed to a 17-year-old boy in a terrifying near-death experience. This is the warning He sent back to us, and we are compelled to share it with you. The parents, do not let our children walk down a path they don't even know is wrong. Listen to this story until the end, because you won't get a second chance to wake them up. Before we begin, please leave a comment with your name and the city you're living in, so we can pray for you and ask God to remember you in His plan. If this reminder touches your heart, please support this mission by hitting the Super Thanks button. Whatever you give, God will multiply it many times. Together, let's build a strong faith community where 20,000 hearts will share the love of God by subscribing to the channel, changing the future for you and those around you. Now, let's listen to his testimony. My name is Noah Whitaker, and if you had asked me a few years ago whether I believed in God, I probably would have shrugged, not because I hated religion, but because I thought it just didn't matter. I wasn't someone who hated God. I wasn't someone who openly opposed religion. I just didn't care. To me, God, church, heaven, those were abstract concepts adults used to feel better about life, like a security blanket for the soul when the world got too hard. But I didn't need that, not yet. I was a regular teenager living in Fort Worth, Texas. Every morning, I'd wake up, plug in my earbuds, scroll TikTok, send a few memes to my friends, then rush out the door for school. I loved the feeling of freedom on the weekends, loved gaming and staying up late, chatting with my best friends like Caleb and Emma. I had plans for the future, a decent paying job, a pickup truck, maybe even a house of my own by 30. As for spiritual stuff, I figured I'll worry about that later, when I'm old. I truly thought I had my whole life ahead of me, until that one morning changed everything. It was a regular Thursday. I overslept and almost missed the bus, skipped breakfast as usual, shoved in my earbuds, and played a new rap track that had dropped the night before. I remember Caleb waiting for me at the school gate. We waved, joked around. School was the same, loud, repetitive, and nothing that really sparked any interest. At lunch, I sat with Caleb and Emma, messing around like we always did. We were daring each other to ask Sophie, the cute girl from English class, to homecoming. The laughter was loud, carefree, full of energy. None of us knew that just a few hours later, everything would change. After school, Caleb and I walked out of the main building, heading toward the bus stop. I turned back, grinning, and called out, "See you tomorrow!" The sky was clear, a soft breeze passed through. A perfectly normal afternoon in Texas. Normal until I heard Caleb scream, "Noah, look out!" I still remember Caleb's scream, sharp and sudden like a lightning bolt in a clear sky. "Noah, look out!" Just 2 seconds later, everything in the world I once knew was completely turned upside down. As I turned my head, I caught only a glimpse of the front of a white truck mounting the curb. There was no time to think, no time to run, no time to react. Just a blinding flash of light followed by a violent collision that flung my body into the air like a torn rag doll. Everything spun around me like a fast-forward reel of film. The sky, the school roof, Caleb's terrified face, and then the pavement rushing toward me in a blink. I remember vividly the chilling shock that raced down my spine the instant my back hit the windshield. It wasn't pain I felt. It was numbness, as if my body had already left me. When I struck the ground, I could feel nothing anymore. My limbs no longer responded, my lungs felt crushed beneath the weight of a mountain, and my eyes opened just enough to see the cold grey of the pavement beneath me, mingling with the metallic taste of blood rising in my mouth. Screams began erupting around me. but in my mind they came only as distant echoes, as if from a world that was slipping farther and farther away. The only sensation I could still feel was the faint rhythm of my heartbeat, each beat stretching out longer than the last, until it finally stopped, leaving behind a silence that was terrifying. And then I saw myself, standing on the other side of the road. I don't remember how I left my body. I only knew I was there, watching myself from just a few steps away. I saw a teenage boy lying lifeless on the pavement, one arm twisted in a grotesque angle, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth, and eyes half open, as if still searching for something, anything, before surrendering completely. I was dead, and somehow I knew that was the truth. Caleb was kneeling beside my body, his hands trembling as he pressed against my chest, as if his friendship alone could force me to return. He sobbed uncontrollably, crying out my name, begging me to wake up. A teacher ran over, then another called for help. Students were gathering, forming a silent circle of horror, but none had the courage to step closer. The sky suddenly began to darken. Cold rain started to fall in silence, stinging and sharp like the final curtain closing on a chapter of my life. I stood there, a bare soul, unable to do anything but witness it all. No one could see me, no one could hear me, and in that very moment I realized death was not the end. It was the doorway into something much bigger, far more serious and more real than anything I had ever imagined. And then I felt it. A light forming in the distance, not like the beam of a headlight or the warmth of the sun. It was powerful and full of authority. It didn't ask permission. It didn't invite me. It commanded. I didn't walk. I was being drawn toward it. And at that very moment my soul began to tremble, not out of fear, but because deep inside something was awakening. I was about to encounter something, or more precisely, the one I used to believe I didn't need. I didn't know whether I was walking or floating. All I remember is that the light ahead grew closer with each moment, yet it wasn't comforting. It didn't feel like sunlight, nor did it bring a sense of peace. It was a light with weight, saturated with authority, as if its very presence could strip everything away from me without even asking. I had never felt so small. Then I stopped. In front of me stood a figure. No introduction was needed. I knew it was him. Not because I had seen pictures of Jesus in church, but because my soul recognized him instantly, as if every cell in my being had always known who he was, even though my mind had never cared to find out. He stood in the midst of blinding light, yet I wasn't blinded. I couldn't make out every detail of his face, but I could feel his gaze piercing straight into the depths of my heart. There was nothing I could hide. My actions, my thoughts, even the things I'd never dared say aloud, they were all laid bare before that gaze. But he was sad. A sorrow as deep as an abyss, as gentle as the breeze, yet as heavy as stone. A sorrow that seemed to crack open something inside my chest. "My son," he said, and I felt every word reverberate through my soul. Just that alone made my knees go weak. I had never been called that before, and I had never imagined that he would know my name, that he even knew I existed. But he knew. He had always known. And then, in a voice soft as wind but sharp as a sword, he said, "Your generation is blindly walking toward destruction." That sentence echoed in my chest. I wanted to respond, to ask what he meant, but the moment I tried to speak, images began to flood my mind, rapid and vivid. I didn't even get to ask him anything before the first image crashed over me like a violent wave. It wasn't blurry or dreamlike. It was so sharp I could hear the footsteps echoing inside the church. feel the colored light from stained glass windows cascading onto the polished wooden floor as if I were truly standing there. At first, everything seemed sacred. Familiar hymns rang out, people rose with hands lifted in worship. The pastor was preaching, the band was playing, the congregation bowed their heads. But what I felt was a terrifying emptiness. I looked around, trying to find what was wrong. And then, little by little, the details began to surface, as if someone was peeling away the outer shell to reveal the truth within. A woman in a long dress bowed her head, but not in prayer. She was texting the man she was having an affair with. On the other side of the room, an older man discreetly snapped a photo of a young girl and saved it to his phone. A group of teens in the back row pretended to sing while giggling over a vulgar video they had watched earlier that morning. The pastor kept speaking, but his words sounded hollow, like they were coming from a speaker, not from his heart. Bible verses were quoted out of context, wrapped in empty encouragements. You deserve to be happy. God wants you to prosper. But no one spoke of sin. No one mentioned repentance. Not a word about the cross or sacrifice. They had come to church to be comforted, not transformed. I saw a father clutching his Bible, yet his eyes were locked on the curves of a young woman entering from the side door. Another woman sang, "I love you," but in her heart she was calculating which rumor to spread to tear down her ministry partner. A young man sat in the front row, lips mouthing worship lyrics, but hidden beneath his hoodie, his AirPods were still playing a violent rap song. I turned around, and that was when I saw Jesus. He was standing outside the church door, not angry, not pounding, he was simply knocking, quietly, but no one heard, no one opened. Everyone was too busy with the program, the live stream cameras, the lights and sound. He wasn't invited in. The church was running smoothly without him. He turned to me, his eyes filled with unspoken sorrow, and then he said, "They call me Lord, but they do not know me." I felt those words tear through my chest. It wasn't just an accusation, it was a cry. A lament from one who had loved too deeply and been forgotten too long. And the most painful part was knowing he wasn't talking about them. He was talking about us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run inside, turn up the volume, shut off the lights, and tell every person in that room, "He's out there! Don't you see?" But I was only a soul watching, unable to do anything except witness and break. The next vision appeared, not of a church, not of stained glass or hymns, but of a city. Yet it was not any city I had known. Skyscrapers were aflame, not from war or bombs, but from a silent decay that couldn't be seen with the eyes. People passed each other in the streets, hurried and disconnected. No one looked up, no one paused. Everyone was busy, lost in their screens, their careers, their own little worlds. I saw households sharing the same roof, yet divided like strangers. Parents glued to their devices, children gaming deep into the night, no prayer, no conversation about God. In schools, I saw classrooms where children were taught that morality depended on emotions. Do what feels good. That was the slogan on the wall. No Bible, no reverence, no truth beyond the self. Teenagers posted videos filled with vanity, darkness and defiance. They laughed as they smoked, cursed, danced to music soaked in rebellion. Music wasn't just background noise. It had become a whisper, a spiritual current shaping hearts. Films glorified wickedness, lyrics turned lust into a prize, and people called it freedom. I saw symbols once tied to darkness, now worn as fashion, printed on shirts, hats, even school backpacks. Symbols that once provoked caution now drew applause. No one blinked, no one questioned. I saw relationships formed long before emotional readiness, celebrated online as signs of early maturity. Sin was no longer hidden, it was embraced, protected, rebranded as identity. But what suffocated me most were their eyes. Even in laughter, even in fame, their eyes were hollow. No light, no spark, as if their souls had been replaced by mechanical shells that moved and spoke but no longer felt. They had millions of likes, thousands of followers, but they no longer knew who they were. Jesus stood beside me. At first he said nothing, but I saw him gazing at each soul, like a father watching his child set themselves ablaze in a fire they mistook for light. Then he whispered, not to me, but into the air, into the age we live in, "Darkness has become entertainment." I wanted to stop the burning. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but the world was too loud, too bright, too busy to hear a cry of warning. And the most terrifying part was that no one knew they were burned. I thought I had seen the worst until the next vision appeared. All color vanished, no more fire, no more music, and no more smirking faces like before. Only a gray, foggy space stretched endlessly, chilling to the bone. In front of me was a line of people so long I couldn't see where it ended. They walked silently, heads bowed, moving slowly. There were no chains, no force, but each one seemed hypnotized, unaware of where they were going. I saw the elderly, the young, students in uniform, adults in business attire. There were faces I recognized, from school, from the supermarket, even from some random weekend party. Some had once spoken to me, some I had just passed by without ever paying attention. But all wore the same expression, empty, lost. No one cried, no one screamed, no one looked back. I looked ahead to where they were walking, and a coldness crept up my spine. Up front was a dense, bottomless darkness. I couldn't see what was inside it, but I knew, with a conviction that went beyond logic, that it was hell. There didn't need to be fire. There didn't need to be torment. The absence of light and hope alone was enough to make any soul tremble. I tried to shout, tried to call out for them to stop, but my voice went unheard. I ran closer, reached out to touch a young woman, but my hand passed through her like I was nothing but mist. I saw a child holding their mother's hand, both with lifeless eyes. I saw a teenage boy in a hoodie. It was a former classmate, someone I used to play basketball with. And then I saw her, Ellie, the girl who used to sit behind me in English class. She was always cheerful, always kind, never said a harsh word to anyone. But now, her eyes were vacant, as if she were hypnotized. She walked toward the dark abyss without the faintest idea of where she was going. I stood there, frozen. Not because I saw hell, but because I realized most of the people in that line weren't bad. They were the good people by the world's standards. People who had never killed, never done anything terribly wrong, but had lived their whole lives without ever knowing the truth. They believed in kindness, in freedom, in their feelings, but they had never encountered Jesus. I turned to him. He was still there, saying nothing, only watching the line. In his eyes there wasn't just sadness, but a quiet, enduring pain, as though he had been calling out to them for years, but they had never listened. And then, with a voice so soft it was barely a whisper, he turned to me and said, "This is why you must return." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there, my heart clenched tight, realizing that from that moment on, I was no longer the carefree kid I used to be. I used to think that was the end, that once I had met Jesus, once I had seen the truth beyond this physical world, everything would conclude right there. A soul brought home, a door gently closing, eternal and final. But it wasn't. Something within me whispered otherwise. A soft voice, almost imperceptible, kept repeating, "It's not over yet," as if there was still one piece unfinished, one word left unspoken, one mission yet to begin. And then, just when I thought I would remain in that realm forever, something inexplicable happened. I don't remember the moment my soul left that stillness. There was no farewell, no light fading into the distance, no last glance from Jesus. Only a sudden jolt, violent and unexpected, as if I'd been yanked from myself. And I fell. I fell into a blinding light, not the sacred glow I'd known before, but the harsh, sterile glare of fluorescent hospital lights. The air was suffocating. Chaos rang in my ears. Flashing monitors, shouting voices. A sharp pain like lightning exploded in my chest, and then the beeping of a heart monitor, steady and alive. I gasped. One breath, ragged and heavy, as though it was dragging my soul back from some invisible abyss. My chest felt like it was crushed by stone, my limbs numb, my throat parched, as if I hadn't breathed in centuries. But I knew I was alive, not just in flesh, but in a way I had never known before. It was like something in me had been reawakened, rebooted by a power no machine could ever replicate. A nurse screamed, her voice cracking with disbelief. "His heart's beating again." I heard footsteps rushing, a doctor's name being called, sharp, urgent breaths around me. Then the door burst open. My mother rushed in as if her entire world had shattered and was now being pieced back together. She threw herself over me, clutching me, sobbing, saying my name again and again, trembling like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She didn't ask what happened. She just cried. Cried like she'd waited her whole life for this moment. I tried to lift my arm, tried to move my lips. My whole body felt melted and frozen at once, but finally I whispered a single sentence, so soft only she could hear. "Mum, I saw him. Jesus. He's real." She froze. Silence fell between us, stretching long enough to feel like an entire lifetime. Then her tears flowed again, this time not from grief, but from recognition. From the confirmation of a prayer that had been rising for years in quiet, faithful desperation. "I've been praying," she whispered, her hands gripping mine like lifelines. "I've been praying for this moment for so long." And I understood. Nothing in this life is random. No prayer is ever wasted. No moment is ever too late for a soul to be called back. I woke up with needles in my arms, my head spinning, and the piercing fluorescent light of the hospital ceiling bearing down on me. The machines beeped in rhythm. The sharp smell of disinfectant made me nauseous. My body felt like lead, but my soul felt light as air, because I knew what had just happened was real. I had seen him, I had heard his voice, and I had been given a second chance. When my mother entered the room, she burst into tears. She held me, trembling, unable to speak. But when I told her what I had seen, about Jesus, about the line of people walking into the darkness, about the church where he was not, she paused. Her eyes became deeper, quieter. Then she whispered, "I've been praying for this day for a very long time." I was speechless. She wasn't surprised. Somehow, deep down, she had always known I was drifting. She had just been waiting for me to realize it on my own. But not everyone was like Mum. When I started telling others, I discovered something even harder than death. Speaking the truth in a world that doesn't want to hear it. The first person I told was Caleb, my best friend, the one who had screamed my name when the accident happened. I believed he would understand, but when I got to the part about the line of people, about seeing familiar faces among them, including his own, Caleb's expression changed. He spoke slowly, cautiously. "Noah, I know you almost died, but are you sure you weren't just hallucinating?" I looked at him for a long time before I said a single sentence. It was more real than anything I've ever known. After that day, Caleb texted me less. He never said anything cruel, but the distance between us grew like a quiet fracture I couldn't mend. I decided to share my story at the youth group at church. They gave me a few minutes to speak. I told them about the accident, the light, and the presence of Jesus. A few laughed, some shook their heads, but others stayed silent, and I knew they were listening. After the meeting, Emma came up to me. She was the quiet girl who usually sat in the back row, barely spoke, never stood out, but now her eyes were red and her lips trembled. "I've been far from God for a long time," she said. "But when you spoke, something inside me woke up." We prayed, right there, in the nearly empty meeting room. No music, no scripted words, just the truth. And the presence I had once seen. It felt like he was there again. But outside that small circle, most of the responses were silence or skepticism. A teacher called my mum saying I might need psychological evaluation for trauma recovery. A school counselor suggested I take a few more weeks off to regain emotional balance. A few people online said I was just looking for attention. Even someone from the church told me, "You should share about Jesus in a gentler way. Don't scare people." I thought everything had ended after my encounter with Jesus. I had seen him, heard the warning, returned, and begun to share what I had experienced. But deep inside, I knew there was still something left unsaid. Like a final chapter yet to be opened, or a lantern still waiting to be lit. I never spoke of it to anyone, but night after night I prayed, "Lord, if there's still something I need to see, please show me." And then, one night, when everything around me had sunk into silence, he answered me, not through thunder or blinding light, but through a dream so simple, yet so deeply stirring, it reached the depths of my soul. I saw myself walking through a dense forest, where the darkness seemed thick enough to swallow even the sound of breath. In my hand was a burning torch, casting a small circle of light, just wide enough to show the path ahead. I didn't know where I was going, but I kept walking, and then from behind more lights began to appear, torches being lit by others, at first just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Some flames flickered weakly, others blazed brightly, devouring the darkness around them. But all of them were lit after my steps had passed. I stopped and turned to look at the line of people making their way through the shadowed woods, and my heart tightened. I didn't know who they were, didn't know where they came from, but somehow my light had led them. Then the voice of the Lord echoed through the wind, not from any one direction, but from all around. "Let your flame be a warning, and a light that leads the way." I knelt in that forest, tears falling onto the earth as they never had before. I understood. I wasn't saved just to live. I was saved to share. The flame in my hand no longer belonged to me. It was his, and I had to let it burn for the souls still wandering in the dark. From that day on, I began to tell my story anywhere people were willing to listen. In schools, in churches, at youth camps, and even online. At first, many shook their heads, others scrolled past as if I were just telling some kind of fantasy. But little by little, I began to see hearts soften. Some came up to me after a message, eyes red, voices trembling, telling me they had been far from God for a long time. But somehow my video kept appearing on their screen. Others said they had once heard a whisper in the night but had ignored it. Some simply stood in front of me, barely saying a word, just crying, and when I reached out to pray, they nodded. I understood that not everyone would believe it, but I didn't need everyone. I just needed my light to reach someone, even just one person, so they could ignite their own torch, and then, from one flame, hundreds, thousands, more could be kindled in this dark forest. I'm not a missionary, I'm not a pastor, I'm just a boy who once died, who was called by name by the one who created every soul, and he said, "Warn them, Lead them. I don't know where my future will go, but I know I won't let this flame die, not when the world still holds so many walking in darkness without even knowing it. Noah's story has made us reflect on the transformation in a person's life, from a young man who didn't believe in God to confronting the truth about the spiritual world. After all, he was 17 years old and had some awareness of God, but his faith wasn't strong enough. But with the girl in the following story, who is only 9 years old, still too young to understand about God and heaven, she was unexpectedly chosen to deliver a message from the divine.
My name is Lucy, and I am 9 years old. I never thought I would be telling a story like this. But now, I know I have to, because I don't want anyone to go through what I saw. I died. I had no idea it was going to happen. I was just an ordinary little girl. I loved drawing, eating strawberry ice cream, and watching cartoons before bed. I didn't think much about God. Sometimes, I went to church with my mom. But heaven and hell were just distant ideas. Something I never really cared about. Tired. Mom told me to go to bed early. I remember climbing into bed, hugging my face and eyes like I did every night. Opened them again. I wasn't there. I found myself floating above my bed. At first, I thought I was dreaming. That maybe I had just dozed off and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, I looked down, and I saw myself. My body was lying still under the blankets, breathing softly, completely unaware of what was happening. My stuffed teddy bear was tucked under my arm, just like every night, but something felt terribly wrong. A chill ran through me, not the kind you feel when you're cold, but something deeper, something that reached into my very soul. I tried to move, to reach out, to touch my own face, but when my fingers brushed against my skin, they passed right through like mist. It was as if I was made of air, a shadow of myself. Panic surged inside me. I called out, "Mom, Mom, help me," but my voice was just an echo, fading into nothingness. No one heard me. No one even stirred. I tried to shake myself awake, to force my body to respond. But it was useless. It was like I had been separated from it completely. That's when I felt it. A force, strong, invisible, but impossible to resist, wrapped around me and pulled. At first, it was subtle, like a gentle tug, but within seconds, it became overwhelming. It yanked me out of my room, past the walls of my house, lifting me higher and higher into the night sky. The world shrank beneath me. The trees, the rooftops, the street lights, they all blurred together as I rose faster than I thought possible. I kicked and thrashed, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing to hold onto. The air itself seemed to slip through my fingers. I screamed, but my voice sounded different, distant, almost weightless, as if I wasn't really there. "Stop, please," I pleaded, but there was no stopping it. The higher I went, the colder it became. It wasn't the kind of cold that made your skin shiver, it was deeper. A coldness that seeped into my soul, making me feel smaller, more helpless than I had ever felt before. Higher and higher I went, past the rooftops, past the clouds, past even the stars. The earth became a tiny, distant thing, a speck in an endless sea of darkness. I looked down, realizing just how far I had gone, and my chest tightened with fear. Terror gripped me. My heart pounded in my chest, if I even had a heart anymore. Mom, I sobbed. I don't want to go alone. The stars around me flickered. No warmth. No comfort. The vastness of space stretched endlessly before me, making me feel small, like a speck of dust floating in a world too big to understand. Was this it? Was I going to disappear forever? And then, he appeared. A light, brighter than anything I had ever seen, cut through the darkness. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. It filled the emptiness around me with warmth, pushing back the fear that had gripped my soul. It was more than light, it was love, power, and something beyond words. Wrapped around me like a shield, holding me in its embrace. And in the middle of that light stood a figure. Strong, radiant, powerful beyond words. I knew who he was before he even spoke. Jesus. The light appeared, brighter than the sun. Yet it didn't hurt my eyes. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It pulsed with warmth, with power, with something so pure and holy that I couldn't look away. It wrapped around me like a shield, chasing away the cold darkness that had gripped me only moments before. I felt it seep into me, into the very core of my being, filling me with something I had never known before, peace. Then, within that brilliant radiance, a figure stepped forward. Jesus. I knew it was him before he even spoke. It wasn't just his appearance, it was something deeper. My soul recognized him. Every part of me knew. It was as if my heart had been searching for him all along without realizing it. And now, standing before him, everything made sense. He was unlike anyone I had ever seen. His presence was overwhelming, yet gentle, powerful yet full of love. His face shone with a glory I can't describe. And his eyes held something infinite. They weren't just looking at me, they were looking into me. Past my fears, past my confusion, straight into the deepest parts of my soul. And yet, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel unworthy. I felt loved. A love so deep, so pure, so endless that it wrapped around me like a warm embrace. It wasn't just love, it was the love. The kind that I had never known existed. My whole body trembled, not from fear, but from something I couldn't put into words. It was like I had been holding my breath my whole life. And now, in his presence, I could finally breathe. I wanted to speak, but no words would come out. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I couldn't even move. All I could do was stand there, completely undone in the presence of the one who made me. Then, he stepped closer. His movement was slow, deliberate, as if every step he took carried the weight of eternity. He reached out, and his hand, strong yet tender, gently wiped the tears from my cheek. The moment he touched me, peace unlike anything I had ever known flooded my entire being. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't lost. I wasn't alone. Lucy, he said, his voice rich and full, carrying both gentleness and authority. It is not your time yet. But there good. Everything around me began to shift. The stars, the vast emptiness of space, even the radiant light surrounding us, all of it faded away. The world as I had known it disappeared, dissolving like mist in the wind. A new scene unfolded before me, growing clearer by the second. And what I saw next changed everything. I found myself standing on a road made of pure gold. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. It wasn't just gold. It glowed, shimmering as if it were alive. Every step I took sent soft ripples of light across its surface. It was breathtaking. Ahead of me stood a massive gate, high above, gleaming like diamonds under light that had no source yet illuminated everything. The gate was beautiful beyond words. But what lay beyond it, that was what took my breath away. Heaven. My mouth fell open in awe. It was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined, more than any picture, more than any dream. I saw fields of the richest green, stretching endlessly, covered in flowers that seemed to glow with colors I had never seen before. But what shocked me most was that the flowers were singing. Soft, sweet melodies filled the air with the gentle breeze. Above me, birds with wings like the golden sky, their songs joining in the symphony of heaven.